The first person to laugh wasn't a reporter. It wasn't Ethan Caldwell. It was a woman sitting in the front row of the public gallery. The sound was soft, cruel, contagious. Within seconds, another person joined in. Then another. By the time Isabella Monroe stepped through the courtroom doors, the laughter had spread across the room like a slow-moving fire. That's her, the gold digger, the woman who stole $40 million from her own husband. I thought she'd look smarter. A camera flash exploded in her face. Another followed. Reporters crowded the aisle, desperate for one photograph of the woman the nation had already convicted. Isabella never looked up. She tightened her grip on an old leather briefcase, the same one she carried when she was a junior financial analyst, years before she ever met Ethan Caldwell. She hadn't brought designer handbags. She hadn't dressed for sympathy. She had come for one thing, the truth. Across the courtroom, Ethan Caldwell watched her approach with a smile so calm it was almost elegant. His navy suit was custom-made. His cufflinks were platinum. His confidence was absolute. Beside him sat his father, Richard Caldwell, the billionaire founder of Caldwell Technologies, a man whose influence had shaped industries and ruined competitors. Richard glanced at Isabella for barely a second. Then he leaned toward his son. I offered her a quiet settlement. Ethan didn't take his eyes off Isabella. She wanted a fight. Richard's lips curled into a cold smile, then let the courtroom bury her. Their attorney, Victoria Blake, organized her exhibits with surgical precision. Every document, every photograph, every bank statement. She had spent months preparing not merely to win a lawsuit, but to destroy Isabella's reputation forever. The courtroom doors opened. All rise. Judge Samuel Whitmore entered with the measured confidence of a man who had spent 4 decades separating truth from performance. Everyone stood. Everyone except Isabella. She was staring at a folded piece of paper resting inside her briefcase. She had never seen it before. There was no envelope, no signature, only 6 handwritten words. Fight until the last witness speaks. Her heart skipped. She looked around instinctively. No one seemed to notice. Ms. Monroe. Judge Whitmore's voice cut through the silence. She immediately stood. My apologies, Your Honor. The judge studied her for a moment before taking a seat. Court is now in session. Victoria Blake rose immediately. She didn't walk to the center of the courtroom. She owned it. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are about to witness one of the most calculated financial betrayals this city has ever seen. She pressed a remote. A massive photograph appeared on the courtroom screen. Isabella and Ethan on their wedding day, smiling, laughing, looking impossibly happy. Another click, the couple boarding a private jet. Another, a luxury villa overlooking the Mediterranean. Another, charity galas, award ceremonies, magazine covers. They looked like the perfect couple. Victoria said softly, but appearances are often the most expensive lies. The next image filled the screen. A wire transfer, $12,400,000. Another, $9,800,000. Another, $17,900,000. The total glowed in bold red letters. $40,100,000. The gallery gasped. Victoria slowly turned toward Isabella. 3 weeks before filing for divorce, over $40 million vanished. She clicked again. Every transfer carried the same authorization. Approved by Isabella Monroe. A man in the gallery laughed out loud. So much for true love. Several others joined him. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel. Order. But the damage had already been done. Victoria smiled. Your Honor, permission to publish Exhibit 12. Granted. An email appeared on every courtroom monitor. The sender was Isabella Monroe. The subject line read Final Transfer. The message contained only one sentence. Move every dollar before Ethan discovers the accounts. The courtroom erupted. Someone shouted. She planned everything. Another voice called out, lock her up? Even one of the jurors slowly folded his arms and frowned. Victoria looked directly at Isabella. Tell this court, Ms. Monroe, were $40 million still not enough? Laughter echoed through the room again. This time, Ethan joined in. He didn't laugh loudly. He simply smiled and gave her a slow, mocking applause. 3 quiet claps. Nothing more. Yet somehow, they hurt more than every insult combined. He leaned forward just enough for only Isabella to hear. You should have accepted my offer. After today, no one will ever believe a word you say. For the first time, Isabella lifted her eyes. She met his gaze without fear. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I never wanted your money. I wanted the truth. Ethan chuckled. The truth? He shook his head. The truth belongs to whoever has the evidence. Victoria extended her hand toward the witness stand. The plaintiff calls Mr. Ethan Caldwell. He adjusted his jacket and confidently walked forward. Every camera followed him. Every juror watched him. No one noticed the silver-haired man who quietly entered through a side door and took the very last seat in the gallery. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. No security. No assistants. No announcement. He simply folded his hands and watched Isabella with eyes filled not with pity, but with pride. Because he knew something no one else in that courtroom knew. Before this trial was over, the woman they were laughing at would no longer be the one on trial. The people laughing would be. Ethan Caldwell walked to the witness stand like a man accepting an award. His shoulders were relaxed. His smile was effortless. He adjusted his tailored suit before placing one hand on the Bible. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Victoria Blake smiled. The plaintiff may proceed. She approached the witness stand slowly. Mr. Caldwell, did you love your wife? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Isabella, long enough for every juror to notice. I loved her more than I loved myself. Several people in the gallery nodded sympathetically. Victoria lowered her voice. When you married Isabella Monroe, did you know she would one day be accused of stealing over $40 million from your company? No, I believed I had married an honest woman. He paused. I was wrong. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Victoria walked a few steps. When did your marriage begin to change? The day I discovered unauthorized transfers. What did you do? I confronted Isabella privately. And what happened? She denied everything. His voice cracked at exactly the right moment. I begged her to tell me the truth. Another pause, but she just kept lying. One of the jurors looked down, visibly disappointed. Victoria turned toward the jury. Did Mr. Caldwell ever attempt to save his marriage? Ethan nodded slowly. More than once. He reached into his pocket. I even kept wearing my wedding ring because I believed she would come home. He placed the ring on the witness stand. The gesture was perfect, simple, heartbreaking. The gallery fell silent. Victoria looked toward Isabella. Did the defendant ever apologize? No. Did she ever return the money? No. Did she ever show remorse? No. Victoria nodded. No further questions. She wasn't finished. She was only changing weapons. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests permission to publish Exhibit 21. Granted. A large photograph appeared on the courtroom screen. It showed Isabella leaving a downtown office building late at night. Standing beside her was an unfamiliar man. Victoria slowly faced the jury. 3 days before filing for divorce, another photograph appeared. The same man, the same building, another late-night meeting. Another. Victoria spoke carefully. Mr. Caldwell, did your wife ever explain these meetings? No. Did she tell you who this man was? No. What did you believe? Ethan lowered his head. I thought she was having an affair. The courtroom erupted. Gasps echoed from every direction. Reporters typed furiously. Victoria waited until the noise settled. Was she? I don't know. But after everything else, I stopped believing anything she said. She turned dramatically toward Isabella. Money, lies, secret meetings. What exactly was your marriage built on, Ms. Monroe? Daniel Brooks rose instantly. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. Victoria smiled politely. I'll let the evidence answer. She clicked the remote again. A surveillance video filled the screen. It showed Isabella entering the executive floor of Caldwell Technologies at 11:43 in the evening. The timestamp was unmistakable. Victoria folded her hands. Mr. Caldwell, who had access to that floor at that hour? Only senior executives. Did anyone authorize your wife to be there? No. So she entered without permission? Yes. The jury's expressions hardened. Everything seemed to fit together. Secret meetings, late-night visits, missing money, divorce. Daniel remained seated. He didn't object. He didn't interrupt. He simply watched. Victoria noticed. She smiled. Mr. Brooks, no questions? Daniel calmly stood. I have a few. He approached Ethan with slow, measured steps. Mr. Caldwell, you testified that you trusted your wife completely. I did. You gave her unrestricted access to executive accounts? Yes. You also gave her unrestricted access to your office? Yes. And your personal laptop? Ethan hesitated. Yes. Daniel nodded. So anyone using your office could also access your executive credentials? Victoria jumped to her feet. Objection. Misleading. Daniel replied calmly. I asked if it was possible. Judge Whitmore looked at Ethan. You may answer. Ethan shifted in his seat. It was possible. The first crack appeared. Small, but real. Daniel continued. Did your office use biometric security? No. Passwords? Yes. Who knew those passwords? Ethan hesitated again. I did. Anyone else? My executive assistant. Anyone in information security? Yes. Daniel smiled faintly. So your credentials weren't unique after all. Victoria objected again. Counsel is twisting the testimony. Judge Whitmore raised a hand. The jury will determine that. Daniel thanked the witness and returned to his seat. Isabella leaned toward him. That's it? Daniel never looked away from Ethan. Watch his hands. She frowned. What? He hasn't stopped rubbing his wedding ring since I mentioned his passwords. Across the courtroom, Ethan looked calm, but beneath the witness stand his right leg was shaking. No one noticed, except Daniel, except Isabella, and except the silver-haired man sitting quietly in the last row. For the first time since entering the courtroom, the old man smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone watching a trial. It was the smile of someone watching a lie begin to collapse. And neither Ethan nor Victoria realized their perfect performance had just developed its first fatal crack. The laughter was gone. Not because the courtroom believed Isabella Monroe, but because doubt had quietly entered the room. For the first time since the trial began, the jurors weren't looking at her like a criminal. They were looking at her like a question they couldn't answer. Judge Whitmore adjusted the file before him. Mr. Brooks, you may call your next witness. Daniel Brooks rose. The defense calls Ms. Isabella Monroe. A ripple of whispers spread across the courtroom. Victoria Blake leaned back confidently. Finally, I've been waiting for this. Isabella walked toward the witness stand. Every camera followed her. Every juror watched her. Every step felt heavier than the last. She placed her hand on the Bible. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Daniel approached with a calm expression. Ms. Monroe, did you authorize the transfer of $40 million? No. Did you write the email presented as Exhibit 12? No. Did you ever receive a single dollar from those transfers? Not one. Daniel nodded. Then tell this court, why did you stay silent for almost a year? The question lingered. Isabella took a slow breath. Because I knew no one would believe me. She looked toward the jury. I wasn't fighting a person. I was fighting a story. The story had already been written before I ever walked into this courtroom. Daniel continued. When did you first suspect something was wrong? The night I found financial reports inside Ethan's office that didn't match the company's official records. What did you do? I made copies. Why? Because by morning I was afraid they would disappear. Did they? Yes. Every original document was gone. The courtroom became silent. Daniel placed a folder on the evidence table. Did you report what happened? I reported it to Ethan. What was his response? He told me stress was affecting my memory. And did you believe him? For a while. Her voice cracked. I thought I was losing my mind. Several jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel lowered his voice. Did anything else happen? Yes. My office computer was wiped. My security badge stopped working. People I'd worked with for years suddenly avoided me. It felt like someone was erasing me before accusing me. Victoria stood immediately. Objection. Speculation. Judge Whitmore nodded. Sustained. Daniel changed direction without hesitation. Ms. Monroe, did you ever hire a private investigator? Yes. What happened to the investigation? He disappeared. The courtroom stirred. Victoria frowned. What do you mean, disappeared? Daniel smiled slightly. You'll have your chance on cross-examination. He looked back at Isabella. One final question. Why didn't you ask your family for help? A long silence followed. Isabella looked down at the silver necklace hidden beneath her collar. My family is complicated. Daniel didn't press further. No further questions. Victoria Blake stood with quiet confidence. She approached the witness stand like a shark circling wounded prey. Ms. Monroe, you mentioned your family several times. Yet no one from your family has appeared in court. Correct? Correct. You've received no public support. No. No one has defended your character. No. Victoria folded her arms. So the people who know you best have chosen to stay away. Daniel stood. Objection. Argumentative. Overruled. Victoria stepped closer. Tell this jury, why has no one from your family come to help you? Isabella's eyes filled with emotion. She answered honestly, because I never asked them to. Victoria smiled. Or because they don't believe you either. The words landed like a punch. For a brief second, even Isabella couldn't answer. Victoria saw her chance. Tell us something simple. What does your father do for a living? Daniel was on his feet instantly. Objection. Relevance. Victoria replied, the defense introduced the subject of family. I'm entitled to explore it. Judge Whitmore, consider the argument. I'll allow the question. The courtroom waited. Every eye turned toward Isabella. She slowly lifted her head. My father hasn't been part of my life for a very long time. So you won't answer? I can't. Or you won't. I made a promise. A promise? That no matter what happened, I would never use his name to save myself. The courtroom fell completely silent. Even Victoria didn't know how to respond. Before she could ask another question, the courtroom doors opened. A court clerk hurried inside, carrying a sealed envelope marked confidential, to be opened by the court only. He handed it directly to Judge Whitmore. The judge examined the seal. His expression changed instantly. This correspondence, he said slowly, comes from legal counsel representing a witness who has never before appeared in this case. He looked toward Daniel Brooks. Mr. Brooks, did you know about this? Daniel answered calmly. I was hoping it would arrive. Judge Whitmore broke the seal. He read the first page. Then he looked up in visible surprise. The court has received a formal request from an individual claiming to possess original evidence proving who orchestrated the fraud. The gallery erupted into whispers. Victoria frowned. Who was the witness? Judge Whitmore closed the file. His voice was calm. The identity will remain sealed until tomorrow's proceedings. In the last row of the courtroom, a silver-haired man quietly stood. He adjusted his charcoal suit, placed his visitor's badge on the empty seat, and walked out without saying a single word. No one noticed him leave. No one except Isabella. The courthouse was surrounded by satellite news vans before sunrise. One question dominated every headline. Why would one of the world's most private billionaires suddenly contact a court? No one knew. No one except three people. Daniel Brooks, the mysterious sender, and the man who had spent the last 4 days sitting silently in the back row. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Judge Samuel Whitmore struck the gavel. Court is now in session. Victoria Blake stood immediately. Before the defense attempts another distraction, the plaintiff calls Leonard Pierce. The chief information security officer of Caldwell Technologies walked confidently to the witness stand. He looked prepared, too prepared. After taking the oath, Victoria smiled. Mr. Pierce, who supervised the investigation into the missing $40 million. I did. Did your team recover the digital authorization records? Yes. Were those records examined by independent experts? They were. And what was their conclusion? Pierce didn't hesitate. Every transfer originated using Isabella Monroe's executive credentials. Victoria displayed another exhibit. A timeline stretched across the courtroom screens. Every login, every password reset, every financial transfer, everything pointed toward Isabella. Victoria folded her hands. Can these records be altered? No. Can they be forged? No. Can someone impersonate another executive without leaving evidence? Impossible. The word echoed through the courtroom. Victoria looked toward the jury. There is no mystery. There is no conspiracy. There are only facts. She sat down confidently. Judge Whitmore turned toward the defense. Mr. Brooks. Daniel walked slowly toward the witness stand. He carried only one document, one page, nothing more. Mr. Pierce, you've testified that no one could access these systems without authorization. Correct. You've worked at Caldwell Technologies for 17 years? Yes. So you're familiar with every cybersecurity policy? I am. Daniel held up the single sheet of paper. This is Policy 9.14. Do you recognize it? Pierce looked at the page. His confidence slipped. Yes. Daniel nodded. Please read the highlighted sentence. Pierce remained silent. Judge Whitmore looked over his glasses. The witness will answer. Pierce swallowed. In emergency situations, the chief executive officer may authorize temporary credential duplication for system recovery. A ripple spread through the gallery. Daniel took another step. So duplicate executive credentials exist. In emergencies. But they exist. Yes. Victoria stood. Objection. The policy is irrelevant. Daniel immediately replied, the plaintiff's entire case depends on proving duplicated credentials were impossible. Judge Whitmore looked at Victoria. Overruled. Daniel continued. Mr. Pierce, who approved emergency credential duplication during the period these transfers occurred. The witness hesitated. My department. Daniel didn't move. I didn't ask who processed the request. I asked who approved it. A long silence followed. Finally, the chief executive officer. And who was CEO? Pierce looked toward Ethan. Mr. Ethan Caldwell. The courtroom became silent. For the first time, several jurors stopped taking notes and simply stared at Ethan. Daniel nodded. So if someone wanted another person's login credentials copied, Mr. Caldwell alone could authorize it. Pierce spoke quietly. Yes. Daniel thanked the witness and returned to his table. Victoria rushed back for redirect. Mr. Pierce, do you possess any evidence that Mr. Caldwell duplicated Isabella's credentials? No. So your testimony does not prove he committed fraud? No. Victoria smiled at the jury. No further questions. The witness stepped down. But something had changed. The certainty was gone. The story no longer seemed simple. During the afternoon recess, Isabella stood alone near the courtroom window. I still don't understand. She whispered. We proved it was possible. Daniel nodded. Today wasn't about proving who did it. It was about proving who could have done it. She looked confused. There's a difference? A very big one. He smiled faintly. When a perfect case develops one crack, people start looking for others. Before Isabella could answer, the courtroom clerk hurried toward them carrying another envelope. Mr. Brooks, this arrived for you. Daniel frowned. Another one? The clerk nodded. It was delivered by hand. No sender? Only this. Daniel turned the envelope over. Written across the front in elegant black ink were 7 chilling words. The truth survives only if opened tomorrow. Isabella stared at the handwriting. She had seen it before. Years ago. On birthday cards. On graduation letters. On every note her mother had ever saved. Her face turned pale. No, she whispered. It can't be. Daniel looked at her. You recognize it? She nodded slowly. My father's handwriting. At that exact moment, the courtroom doors opened once more. Every head turned. The silver-haired man stepped inside. For the first time since the trial began, he wasn't wearing the clothes of an anonymous observer. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit with the unmistakable crest of Monroe Global Holdings on his lapel. Richard Caldwell saw him first. The color drained from his face. His hands tightened around his cane. He leaned toward Ethan and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, we have a problem. Ethan followed his father's gaze. His confident smile vanished instantly because the man quietly taking a seat in the last row wasn't there to watch the trial anymore. He was there to end it. The silence inside the courtroom felt heavier than the walls themselves. No one was looking at Isabella anymore. Every eye was fixed on the silver-haired man, sitting quietly in the last row. Richard Caldwell refused to turn around. He already knew who it was. Ethan wasn't so lucky. The moment he recognized the face, every ounce of confidence drained from his body. He whispered, "No." Richard grabbed his son's arm. "Don't look at him again." Judge Whitmore struck the gavel. "Court is back in session." He looked toward Daniel Brooks. "Mr. Brooks, I understand the defense has filed an emergency motion." "Yes, Your Honor." "Does it concern the gentleman seated in the gallery?" "It does." Victoria Blake immediately stood. "The plaintiff objects before any testimony is offered." Judge Whitmore looked at her. "On what grounds?" "The defense intentionally concealed the witness." Daniel answered calmly, "No, Your Honor. We protected the witness until his safety and the integrity of the evidence could be guaranteed." Victoria frowned. "What evidence?" Daniel slowly lifted the second sealed envelope. "The evidence that changes this case." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Whitmore nodded. "You may proceed." Daniel broke the seal. Inside were dozens of original documents. Every page carried notarized certifications. Every signature had been authenticated. Every date stretched back nearly 15 years. Daniel placed the first document on the screen. Confidential board resolution. Victoria stepped closer. Her confidence began to fade. Daniel spoke. "This resolution was approved 11 years ago." He looked toward Richard Caldwell. "It authorized the creation of duplicate executive credentials for covert internal investigations." The courtroom froze. Daniel turned to Leonard Pierce. "Mr. Pierce, is that your signature?" The cybersecurity director adjusted his glasses. His hands began to shake. "Yes." "So, duplicate credentials weren't merely possible. They officially existed." "Yes." Victoria objected. "That still doesn't prove Isabella was framed." Daniel nodded. "You're right. It doesn't." He lifted another document. "This does." The second exhibit appeared on the courtroom screen. A server authorization request. Requested by Ethan Caldwell. Approved by Richard Caldwell. Purpose: executive credential replication. The courtroom exploded. Gasps echoed from every direction. Reporters stood from their seats. Even the jurors leaned forward. Victoria's voice trembled. "Forgery." Daniel smiled for the first time. "I expected that response." He held up the original. "The ink has already been tested. The signatures have already been verified. The chain of custody has already been authenticated." Judge Whitmore examined the certification. His expression hardened. "The document is admitted." Richard Caldwell gripped his cane so tightly his knuckles turned white. Ethan looked at his father in panic. "You said those files were destroyed." Richard didn't answer. Daniel displayed another exhibit, a security camera image. It showed Ethan entering the company's executive server room after midnight. The timestamp matched the same night the first fraudulent transfer occurred. Victoria forced herself to remain composed. "Mr. Brooks, a photograph proves nothing." Daniel nodded. "I agree." He pressed the remote once more. A second image appeared, then a third, then a fourth. Each showed Ethan carrying encrypted backup drives into the server room. Each timestamp matched another fraudulent transaction. The gallery became silent. Daniel looked directly at Ethan. "Would you like to explain these visits?" Ethan swallowed. "I was reviewing financial systems." "Alone?" "Yes." "Without notifying your cybersecurity department?" "I need to." Daniel walked closer. "Because you were the CEO." "Yes." "And because no one questioned your access." Ethan remained silent. Daniel returned to the evidence table. "There's only one question left." He looked toward Judge Whitmore. "Who authorized the person who framed Isabella?" No one spoke. Daniel slowly turned toward the last row. "The defense calls its final witness." Every head turned. The silver-haired man stood. He buttoned his jacket with calm precision. The courtroom held its breath. Richard Caldwell closed his eyes. He already knew the trial was over. Victoria whispered, "This can't be happening." Isabella Monroe began walking toward the witness stand. Each step echoed through the silent courtroom. Not a single reporter reached for a camera. Not a single juror looked away. Even Judge Whitmore watched in complete silence. Alexander stopped beside the witness box. before taking the oath. He looked across the courtroom at Isabella. For the first time in nearly a decade, father and daughter shared a quiet smile. It lasted only a second, but it said everything words never had. Then Alexander turned toward the clerk, raised his right hand, and prepared to swear an oath that would destroy the Caldwell empire forever. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Not when Isabella had been accused. Not when the $40 million had appeared on the screen. Not even when the jury had begun to doubt. This silence was different. It was the sound of a lie running out of places to hide. Judge Whitmore looked toward the courtroom doors. The defense may call its next witness. Daniel Brooks rose slowly. He buttoned his jacket, looked once at Isabella, then faced the judge. The defense calls Mr. Alexander James Monroe. For 2 long seconds, nothing happened. Victoria Blake smirked. Your Honor, perhaps the witness doesn't exist. Then the heavy oak doors opened. A tall, silver-haired man entered without security, without assistance, and without saying a word. His midnight blue suit was perfectly tailored. The crest of Monroe Global Holdings gleamed on his lapel. Richard Caldwell's face turned pale. His hands tightened around his cane. Ethan whispered, "No, it can't be." The gallery erupted. That's Alexander Monroe, the billionaire. Why is he here? Judge Whitmore struck the gavel. Order. Alexander walked calmly to the witness stand. He raised his right hand. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. After taking his seat, Daniel asked quietly, Please state your name for the record. Alexander James Monroe. Occupation? Founder and executive chairman of Monroe Global Holdings. Daniel nodded. Mr. Monroe, do you know the defendant, Isabella Monroe? Alexander looked toward Isabella. For a moment, the courtroom disappeared. There was only a father looking at his daughter. Then he answered, She is my daughter. The courtroom exploded. Reporters rushed for their phones. Several jurors stared at Isabella in disbelief. Victoria herself looked stunned. Daniel allowed the silence to settle. Did your daughter ever ask you for money? Never. Did she ever use your name to gain a promotion? No. Did she ever ask you to influence Caldwell Technologies? Never. Alexander's voice became softer. When she graduated from college, I offered her a position in my company. She refused. I offered her a trust fund worth hundreds of millions. She refused. I asked her why. Alexander smiled sadly. She said, If I ever succeed, I want the world to believe it was because of my work, not because of my father. For the first time since the trial began, the jury looked at Isabella with admiration instead of suspicion. Daniel opened the black forensic binder. Mr. Monroe, why did Monroe Global audit Caldwell Technologies? Alexander answered calmly. Because Monroe Global quietly financed Caldwell Technologies during its earliest expansion. A wave of surprise swept through the gallery. Daniel continued. Did that agreement include independent audit rights? It did. Were those rights ever exercised? Yes. 6 days ago. Daniel displayed the first page of the forensic audit. Every transfer appeared on the courtroom screens. But this version contained information the plaintiff had hidden. A second authorization code. Daniel pointed toward the highlighted column. What is administrative override? Alexander answered without hesitation. It is a master authorization. It bypasses the account owner's approval. And who possessed that authority? The chief executive officer. Daniel slowly turned toward Ethan. Who was CEO? Alexander never looked away from Ethan. Ethan Caldwell. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Victoria stood immediately. Objection. The witness is speculating. Alexander calmly reached into his briefcase. I don't speculate. He removed a certified server log. The backup servers recorded every hidden administrator action. He handed the document to the bailiff. Judge Whitmore examined the certification. Admitted, Daniel displayed the next exhibit. A deleted email recovered from the archive server. From Ethan Caldwell to Leonard Pierce. Subject, final preparation. The message read, duplicate her credentials. She takes the blame. The courtroom erupted again. Victoria stepped backward. Her confidence vanished. Ethan shot to his feet. That's fake. Alexander quietly placed a small, encrypted drive on the evidence table. No, That drive contains the original server image. It was preserved under Monroe Global's audit agreement 11 years ago. Daniel pressed the remote one final time. A security video filled the courtroom screens. It showed Ethan entering the executive server room alone just minutes before the first fraudulent transfer. Then another recording. Then another. Each timestamp matched the missing money. Each visit corresponded to an administrative override. Judge Whitmore removed his glasses. He looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, would you like to explain why every hidden server log, every recovered email, every audit record, and every security recording points to you? Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Across the courtroom, Isabella closed her eyes, not in relief, but because, after a year of being called a thief, someone had finally forced the truth to speak. Daniel returned to the defense table. Without raising his voice, he delivered one final sentence. Your Honor, the prosecution did not bring the wrong evidence. They brought the wrong defendant. The courtroom fell into absolute silence, because everyone finally understood the terrible truth. The woman they had laughed at had never been on trial. The man accusing her had been. The courtroom stood frozen. No one whispered. No one moved. The laughter that had filled the room on the first day had vanished, replaced by a silence so heavy it seemed impossible to breathe. Judge Whitmore slowly removed his glasses. He looked directly at Ethan Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, this court is giving you one opportunity. Explain the evidence. Ethan's lips parted. Nothing came out. Victoria Blake hurried to her feet. Your Honor, the plaintiff requests a brief recess. Judge Whitmore's voice was firm. Denied. The witness will answer. Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the table. The email was taken out of context. Daniel Brooks stepped forward. Then perhaps this will provide the missing context. He placed one final exhibit onto the screen, a video recording. The timestamp matched the night before the first fraudulent transfer. The courtroom watched in complete silence. On the screen, Ethan and Richard Caldwell stood inside the executive boardroom. Richard's voice echoed through the speakers. Once the money is moved, blame Isabella. Ethan hesitated. What if she fights back? Richard smiled. No one believes a woman they already laugh at. The video ended. The silence was deafening. Victoria slowly lowered her head. She knew the case was over. Judge Whitmore turned toward Richard Caldwell. Do you deny making those statements? Richard stared at the screen. For the first time in decades, the billionaire had no answer. Judge Whitmore nodded to the bailiff. The recording is admitted into evidence. Daniel didn't celebrate. He simply looked at Isabella. You can stop fighting now. A tear rolled down her cheek, not because she had won, but because someone had finally believed her. Judge Whitmore straightened the paper before him. After reviewing the testimony, forensic audit, authenticated corporate records, backup server logs, and video evidence, this court finds that Isabella Monroe was deliberately framed through an organized scheme of corporate fraud, digital identity theft, and fabricated financial records. He looked directly at Isabella. Ms. Monroe, you are cleared of every allegation before this court. A wave of emotion swept through the gallery. Several jurors smiled. Others quietly applauded before realizing where they were. The judge struck the gavel once. There will be order. He then turned toward Ethan. Ethan Caldwell, you are hereby referred for prosecution on charges, including corporate fraud, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and perjury. 2 detectives entered through the courtroom doors. They approached Ethan. Mr. Caldwell, please stand. Ethan looked desperately toward his father. Dad. Richard never answered. He simply closed his eyes. The empire he had spent 40 years building had collapsed in less than 1 hour. As the detectives placed handcuffs on Ethan, he turned toward Isabella. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry. She looked at him calmly. Then she spoke the words that silenced the entire courtroom. When they laughed at me, you laughed the loudest. And today, the truth had the last word. The detectives escorted Ethan toward the exit. Victoria quietly removed her attorney's badge from her jacket and placed it on the table. Her victory had become her greatest defeat. Judge Whitmore struck the gavel one final time. This case is dismissed with prejudice. He paused before adding one last sentence. In this courtroom, wealth never decided justice, but the truth always did. The courtroom emptied far more quietly than it had filled. For days earlier, people had fought for a seat just to watch Isabella Monroe fall. Now they walked out with their heads lowered, avoiding her eyes. The reporters who had laughed at her waited outside with microphones raised. The same cameras that had once called her a thief now searched for a redemption story. Isabella walked past every one of them without saying a single word. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth had already spoken. Inside the courtroom, the silence felt almost sacred. Daniel Brooks quietly closed his briefcase. He smiled at Isabella. You never needed someone to save you. She looked at him curiously. You only needed someone willing to uncover the truth. Isabella's eyes filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done this without you. Daniel shook his head. No, you survived because you never lied, even when lying would have been easier. He extended his hand. She shook it firmly. Then he walked away, leaving the courtroom exactly as he had entered it, without seeking applause, without seeking attention, only justice. Across the room, Judge Whitmore stepped down from the bench. In 43 years, he had presided over murder trials, billion-dollar lawsuits, and political scandals. Yet today felt different. He stopped in front of Isabella. I've learned something today. She looked at him. The judge smiled. The strongest person in a courtroom is rarely the one with the most money. It's the one who refuses to surrender the truth. With that, he nodded respectfully and left. Only two people remained, Isabella and Alexander Monroe. Father and daughter stood only a few feet apart. Neither knew how to erase 10 years of silence. Alexander finally spoke. When your mother passed away, I thought protecting you meant preparing you to stand alone. He looked down. I was wrong. Isabella slowly walked toward him. I thought proving myself meant living without my family. I was wrong, too. For the first time in nearly a decade, Alexander smiled. Not as a billionaire, not as one of the world's most powerful businessmen, but simply as a father. He opened his arms. Isabella embraced him. The tears they had both hidden for years finally came. Not tears of defeat, not tears of revenge, tears of coming home. Weeks later, the headlines spread across the country. Ethan Caldwell sentenced in corporate fraud scheme. Richard Caldwell resigns as investigation expands. Isabella Monroe completely exonerated after courtroom revelation. Monroe Global Holdings announced a scholarship in Eleanor Monroe's name for young women pursuing careers in finance and law. Alexander personally invited Isabella to become executive vice president of the company. She smiled warmly. I appreciate the offer, but I have my own dream. Months later, Isabella opened her own forensic accounting firm. Its mission wasn't to make people rich. It was to protect innocent people from becoming victims of powerful lies. The firm's first case was representing an employee who had been framed by another corporation. When reporters asked why she had chosen that path, Isabella answered with a quiet smile. Because I know what it feels like when no one believes you. She looked toward the courthouse one last time. The same building where strangers had laughed at her. The same courtroom where her life had almost been destroyed. And the same place where the truth had changed everything. Before leaving, she turned to the camera one final time. Now I want to ask you 3 questions. If the whole world believed you were guilty, would you still have the courage to fight for the truth? Would you protect your integrity, even if it meant losing everything you owned? And if you were Alexander Monroe, would you have waited until the perfect moment to take the stand? Or would you have stepped in sooner? If this story reminded you that truth always outlasts lies, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more unforgettable courtroom dramas where justice is earned, not given. Because people may laugh at you for a moment, but the truth has a way of making them remember your name forever.